Staunton, and we're being broadcast on WRVO Radio Network, division of Reno Viola Outdoors. WRVO Radio Network is a radio network geared towards the fisherman and the outdoors person who's looking for not just only local stuff, but pretty much international stuff, I would say. We've got Grizz down in California there. I think it's in California. There's a guy in New Brunswick, and so there's, it's pretty diverse, anyways, lineup that we've got. So, and Reno's done a very good job at this, as he does everything that he does, and I'm just happy and proud to be part of it. So, what are we going to do today? I'm going to talk about gasoline. Why am I going to talk about gasoline? Because there's a lot of issues that it brings up, and I've seen it in my many years of working on outboards and motorcycles, that one of the biggest problems over the years manufacturers have had to deal with is the change in fuels. And as government intervention has come and said we need better fuel emission standards and numbers, and the fuel companies have had to meet certain standards as well too. So they've changed the fuel, and as the fuel has changed, so has the engines have changed as well. So because actually the gasoline that was first used in Henry Ford's car way back in 19 or whatever, it's not anything like the fuel that you get today. It was way less distilled and was much more, probably way more polluting, and a lot more lethal for you too, probably. There was a thing mechanics got back then was called black lung, and they died on a rather frequent rate. So it's something that you sort of think about after a while of being a mechanic. So breathing carbon monoxide fumes for a long period of time, I'm sure it's not too good for your head. Anyways, there's the dog. Just hope somebody's not here. So anyways, let's try and get through this. Gasoline was never really intended for car engines. It came up from J.P. Getty. He had a Standard Oil, and they had just figured out how to distill gasoline from their oil that he was now pulling out of the ground, and he had no market for it. And he found out that Henry Ford was making the assembly line for cars and was making a whole bunch of engines, and he decided that would probably be a good place for him to be able to sell his oil. So what he did was he artificially dropped the value of gasoline to a level that it was compatible with, at that time, with ethanol and methanol, because some of the vehicles back then, that's what they were running on, was ethanol. And Henry Ford's idea was that his original cars were going to run on ethanol. He had fields of hemp that we were ready to process into it. So along comes another guy and thinks, "Oh, geez, let's find a venue for my product rather than yours." And now we have gasoline, which was artificially held low levels for 30 years just to be able to compete with ethanol. If you remember some of the old pumps, they had ethyl, and then they had another pump, and that ethyl was the ethanol. So anyways, I think I might be wrong on that, but anyways, what happened later on was they found that gasoline wasn't working well in the engines because it didn't have any cushioning effect for the valves, and so they were burning valves out at a various rate. So they had to come up with something, and they came up with lead. And that was one of Henry Ford's engineers came up with that, and so they decided at that point, well, everything's okay, and many years later we found out that putting lead in the gasoline and putting it through an internal combustion engine wasn't one of the better things that we could have done as human beings. So we decided not to do that, and we replaced that at one point in time with this wonderful substance called MTBE, which is sort of like a lead as well too, but not quite. But so anyways, this because any heavy element precipitates out in the water table. So what happened is in these reservoirs in California, they were finding high levels of MTBE precipitating out, and they decided at that point we're going to have to stop using MTBE. So they started phasing it out a few years, actually not a few years ago, about 10, more than that, probably about 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, so they started to phase it out. And they started to phase in more ethanol. And that's when a lot of the problems as a mechanic I started to see, well, as a lot of mechanics started to see, and there's a lot of manufacturers started to see as well too, because just magically engines would blow up and stuff like that. So, and then there's no rhyme or reason to it as well too. So, but a lot of it was related to the fuel and to the changeover, and because you really can't mix two fuels. MTBE and ethanol fuel doesn't really mix that well, especially if one is older than the other one. So there's a lot of chemical reaction that takes place that breaks down one fuel more than the other, and the components, the additives of the other fuel start to precipitate out, and then they leave a deposit in the carburetors and the fuel lines and stuff. The original ethanol problem was the fact that if it was too high, it would take the inside of the fuel lines and degrade them. It would turn them into powder, and then that would clog the jets, and then those jets would make it smaller, and as they narrowed up, it leaned out the engine at full throttle. There wasn't enough fuel, and if you could get them to run, but what would happen is they would run really, really good for a short period of time as they were leaning out, and then they would stop. So you'd hear stories of, it was really, really well, and it was running better than it ever had. Well, because it was twice as rich before, and then as it leaned out, it started to run really good, but then it was too lean. So that's what ends up happening with these things. So that was the original problems about 20 years ago. We started getting, 85, 86, we started getting bulletins about ethanol and fuel and the problems with fuel lines and rubber diaphragms and stuff like that. So, in certain motors, if I ever see a pump that's older than 10 years old, I always take it out and replace it, because the ethanol back then is not the same as now. And over a period of time, the ethanol dries the rubbers out and stuff, and it takes the plastic elasters out of the rubber. It's just a chemical reaction, that's all it is. That never happened with gasoline when it had lead in it, or MTBE, or happened at a less rate or amount. So let's get onto another thing that ends up happening is, one thing I want to say right here is gasoline is only designed for cars. It's not designed for outboards. It's not designed for, it's not designed for planes, because planes have a special fuel called avgas. And that's different than gasoline that you put in your car. It's not designed for lawnmowers. It's not designed for snowblowers or snowmobiles, or it's only designed for cars and trucks. It's designed for that internal combustion, that internal combustion spark ignition engine that is in your vehicle. And the reason why most vehicles don't see issues with ethanol fuel on a regular basis, if they're used regularly, is because of that fact. Okay, you store a ethanol fuel in a metal gas tank, say in an old car, for a long period of time. If it's not stabilized properly, you're not going to have a gas tank left there. So there's special allowances that have to be made depending on the gas tank that you're using, and I can get into that and little fixes later on. But what ends up happening is the fuel starts to go bad, and as it goes bad, it changes its chemical composition. As it changes its chemical composition, it starts to become very corrosive and acidic, and it's got a air environment there, and it gets some hot and cold and some condensation off the inside of the metal gas tank, and it just starts a really good process going. If it's aluminum, it all turns white and it plugs things really, really badly. If it's a steel gas tank, typically after a while it'll just pinhole rust through it, and it'll just leak. It'll sweat on the outside for a long period of time, type thing, and then suddenly you just get a big hole in it, and then it'll just be all, the bottom will be done, type thing. So you would get that with other fuels as well too in the past, but typically not to the extent you're getting them now. And as it would take a lot longer when you had lead in the fuel and stuff. So lead was pretty good, but it obviously came out in the tailpipes and went up in the air and came down, and it laid over everything over a period of time. So we were just ingesting it on a daily basis. So we figured, who knows what could happen. Anyways, so the problems with ethanol are that, or an ethanol fuel, or in a fuel that has 10% ethanol in it, and why they're using ethanol rather than something else is another political decision as well too. The corn growers in the States they saw their revenues drop because there was less high fructose corn syrup because there was an obesity problem. So one thing leads to another. So they saw a 10 to 20% drop in their sales, so they needed to get rid of their corn someplace. So one guy said, well, let's make ethanol about it, because I think he was from North Carolina or something like that, South Carolina. And they said, well, let's make ethanol out of it. And, they decided, let's water down the gasoline. And that's exactly what they're doing. They wanted to see, and there's the other thing too, is they wanted to get off of the reliance on foreign oil. So what better way to do it than to water down your fuel? And that's basically what they're doing, is they're watering down the fuel. Now, when you water down the fuel, you do another thing, is you're diluting that fuel. So the BTUs that I'm getting out of that fuel are not as great. So what ends up happening is now I only have 90% of the gasoline going in there, so my fuel economy is lessening, and that's what people are not seeing. They weren't aware of it until a few years ago. Now we're going to be a bit more cognizant of it, because at $1.33 a liter, I want my fuel economy. And funny thing is, the injection systems that they're using on the cars these days are the injection systems we had in outboards back in 1998. They're using direct injection on cars today, and direct injection started to come out in 1998. Actually, direct injection is just a variation of diesel injection into a two-stroke. So it's been around. It's just nobody was smart enough to put A and B together and come up with C. Until this guy, this German engineer, or these guys down in Australia came up with. So, but even still, it's hard to get people over the fact that I have to put oil in this container and I'm going to consume it, rather than I have to burn oil in my car, drive it to a station, let them dump it out, take my filter off, put a new filter on, put more oil in it, and I got to come back and do that over and over and over again. To me, that makes no sense. I think, put the little bottle in your car. It's like windshield washer. You've consumed all your windshield washer. Put some more two-stroke oil in it. It's. Anyways, that's on another. That's, to me, all cars should be two-stroke direct injections, or diesel turbos, one or the other. Forget gasoline. Forget this fuel injection stuff with gasoline, a four-stroke engine. Makes no sense. Diesels will make more sense for pulling and towing and stuff like that. Two-stroke direct injection in town, because you want the economy and the weight reduction and all the rest of that. And you don't need a four-stroke engine. So anyways, the problems with it, with ethanol fuel is it's hydroscopic, so it likes to absorb water. And you put a fuel that's designed to absorb, or not, yeah, it is designed to absorb water because there's ethanol in it. That's why we don't have to use gasoline antifreeze anymore. Talk to your grandparents out there, the younger guys out there, or when I was 16 years old, we were putting gasoline antifreeze in. Why? We had a metal tank. You had a fuel that didn't absorb any water at all, so that any condensation in that gas tank would sit at the bottom of the tank, and in the wintertime it would get sucked up into the fuel line and it would freeze. So you have to put gasoline antifreeze in it, which was an ethanol or a methanol additive. And what it did was, and you couldn't put too much of it because you'd blow the motors at times. And what you would do is you put this into it, and then it would soak up the water on the bottom of the fuel. This is where they experimented with the first additives, the fuel, and they knew about ethanol way long time ago. They could have been using it back then, but they were using MTBE. But anyways, so you put the gasoline antifreeze in, it would soak up the moisture at the bottom of the tank, put it in suspension, and because the engine had a NOx sensor in it, it was no problem. It didn't matter if the fuel degraded a bit, and it wouldn't destroy the engine. So, and that in itself leads to the problems with an outboard. Say a carbureted, an earlier era outboard, like an 80. Any carbureted outboard that doesn't have a NOx sensor. There's a few EFIs out there that have NOx sensors, but what happens is that NOx sensor realizes that the engine is detonating, and then it backs the timing out, so it can run poor quality fuel. And that's the problem with ethanol fuel. As it degrades, it loses its octane rating, and it becomes poor quality, so it will blow up at a earlier pressure point. Like it'll blow up before the spark even hits it, so it'll blow up under pressure and heat rather than spark ignition. And when it blows up under pressure and heat, it becomes a diesel engine. It no longer becomes a spark ignition engine. So, and that's where your detonation occurs, and that continues into pre-ignition and stuff. So. So what will end up happening is because ethanol fuel has this ability to absorb water, and the higher level of water that it absorbs means that now you have a degraded fuel. It's no longer the octane rating of 87. It's typically less. So then that engine is now not at its optimum. It doesn't have the fuel that the manufacturers designed it to burn. So, and you can do damage to the engine. So people will say, well, why don't I run premium fuel? Well, yes, you can run premium fuel. It may last a bit longer. It's still in an open container. It's still gasoline, so it's still going to go bad. So that's not really the answer. And then the thing is, premium fuel is designed for an engine that has a 91 octane rating engine to it. That meaning that that engine is going to have higher compression ratio. Okay, and the reason they have a higher compression ratio is because it's designed to squeeze the fuel a bit harder, and they're getting more horsepower out of that fuel. There's race fuels that we used to run that were 110 octane and stuff like that. So, because, we were running, I didn't know that we were running higher compression, 12, 13, 14 and a half to 1 compression engines. So, a normal car engine is about 8 to 1. Most of my race engines were 10 to 1 to 12 to 1. My TZ was 12 to 1 ratio. So, I was running special fuel for that. And when it became unavailable, then I had to, make up a fuel, but I was using a very high octane fuel in order to compensate for the compression ratio of the engine. So, Your basic marine engine today is designed to run on regular fuel. I don't see many that aren't, unless there's a special racing engine, and in that respect, they would say right on the dash or someplace that you've got to run this special premium fuel. But unless you're running some kind of mercury, special, and you won't be going to a pump anyway. So premium really isn't the answer, because premium in a regular 91 octane and in a 87 octane engine is not going to give you any more horsepower or anything like that. In fact, it can give you less horsepower because you can't utilize that fuel completely, because that engine doesn't have the thermodynamics to burn it off fully. So you're better off and this is where we're going to get up into the fixes for it, but you're better off just to run an 87 octane fuel and don't run as much, and just replenish it more frequently rather than leaving a full tank sitting there for a couple of weeks because I don't have time to go out or whatever. So basically the problems with ethanol fuel is because it's hydroscopic, it likes to absorb moisture. You put it in a marine environment. Some of the older boats had metal or aluminum gas tanks, which is even worse. You've got, say you're going out to a big lake, like, say Big Rideau or something like that, and the water temperature is 72, but it's 90 degrees out, it's stinking hot. You've got an aluminum boat, so the boat is just stinking hot because it's all above the water line, but the bottom of the boat is touching the water. So that part of the boat is, 70 degrees type thing. And the top of the boat is 80 or 85, whatever, or even hotter than that at times. And so you've got a metal boat, so you've all got all this connection. Like the tin is like a big heat sink. So if you got a metal tank and it's going to be sitting on the floor or the bottom of the boat, it's going to get hot from the top of it, and then it's going to get cool from the bottom. So you can get quite a bit of condensation unless you're running, say, a water fuel separator on a carbureted engine. That's fine, but they were finding on some of the EFIs and some of the DFIs that if you're running a water fuel separator before it can cause a restriction to the main motor. So, and most of these DFIs these days and the EFIs have a way to compensate for water in the fuel, or some kind of warning system to tell you, or some kind of filter system that takes it out as well too. So you're pretty safe on anything from, say, 2000 on as far as intrusion of water, if it's an EFI or a DFI engine. If it's a carbureted engine, then no, basically the normal filter isn't going to filter much out, other than the fact that you've got a filter that's probably a 20 or less than a 10 micron filter that is going to pass a lot of things as well too. So in the carbureted engines, you have to sort of be concerned about it more than a DFI or an EFI engine. So and the problems are the fact that the fuel goes bad so quickly. Once it loses its octane, it loses its octane. Octane is just a number, and a number means that I can squeeze this fuel so much, and it's not going to blow up on me. And that allows the engine manufacturers to utilize that fuel to get a certain amount of horsepower out of it. And so they need to be able to say, okay, I need this fuel to work this certain way, and the fuel companies say, well, gasoline is gasoline. As long as it's fresh, it'll do what you want. When it's not fresh, we don't know. So what'll end up happening is, in a car, because you're replenishing it on a constant rate, you don't really see too many issues with contaminants in the fuel, and there's a filter there, and it's meant to stop a certain amount of debris, but it's certainly not going to stop water and stuff like that. But like I say, you're not going to get any real issues unless you've got a fair amount of water that you either put in there inadvertently, or the vehicle is sat for a long period of time in an environment where it's getting hot heat cycles. So it sort of lends itself to the fix that I've got. Basically, two things that I do. I sort of plan my day or weekend, whatever, and I don't put much more fuel in it than I really need. If I do, I will stabilize it as quickly as I possibly can afterwards, just to make sure that that fuel's not going to go bad. Because the next time I take it out, if it's a week or 2 weeks later, I want to make sure that it hasn't dropped any points in its octane rating. Because I look at these motors, like at least once you start getting up to over 150, 200, 2.25, 2.5, 250 HOs and 300s and stuff like that. These are pretty much race engines. If you don't want to call them race engines, then call them a generator. And you got to treat them differently. So if you're not willing to look at it from that aspect, then I tell customers that I think you're going to have problems with your motor and stuff. And I've seen a couple of guys where they've you say you should be doing this, you should be doing that, and whatever, and later on it's I'm in a rush. Can you do this? And I'm thinking to myself, I told you so type thing. But anyways, people don't like that sometimes. So, but it comes down to a certain amount of proper maintenance and a certain amount of education these days I think customers should have, and a certain amount of proactiveness and responsibility that, if you're going to take ownership of the boat, you should at least put some good fuel and oil in it and stuff like that, and do what the manufacturer recommends as far as maintenance, as far as intervals. Because everybody gets an owner's manual. If not, I'm sure they can get it online from the manufacturer and stuff. So, but with respect to fuel, it's not the customer's fault if they get bad gas or they don't know. Okay, but in that respect, then it's just a matter of education and stuff, and the proper education, because and it changes over a period of time. Because back when I first started working on motorcycles and stuff, the fuel conditioners and the fuel stabilizers we were using back then have changed. Then they're not the same as what they are today. And the reason why they aren't the same as they are today is because of the fuel has changed. The characteristics of the fuel has changed. So the characteristics of the fuel stabilizers and conditioners have changed as well too, along with it. So what I'm using these days is a Startron product from Starbright, I believe it is. But it's what it does is they have two things. I have a let's see if I can find it here. They have a fuel stabilizer, and then they have a conditioner or an enzyme style type of fuel treatment. Yeah, it is Starbright. So what it's called Startron. It's a fuel treatment, and it's designed to deal with the issues of ethanol fuel. I've been using this stuff for about 5 years now. And it's I have I don't have any problems with fuel. All the time I do what I say. If I know I'm gonna run, if I'm going to Big Rideau and I know I'm gonna run here and here, then I will put more gas in. If I'm going to Mississippi, and I'll just put $20 in and stuff like that. So and what happens in October is as soon as October starts, I put fuel stabilizer in my fuel on a regular basis, because I never know when it's gonna, I'm gonna sit for 2 or 3 weeks. We're gonna get crappy weather. We can't get out, or I got something really important to do, or I know some guys hunting that point, so they'll wait. They'll go hunting for a few weeks, and then they'll go fishing afterwards in November and stuff. So, but so I'll start in October, and mid-November you can't get on the water anymore. So at that point, I've done the one thing that a lot of the dealerships are going to do, and that's stabilize your fuel system. And that's doing your own winterization yourself. Now, you combine that with some of these E-Tech engines where you can do your own, the engine oils itself, and you can do your own winterization. You don't even have to take it to a dealer. So in that respect, you've just saved yourself a few bucks and stuff. So, and in the long run, you're going to save yourself a lot of money in service, not having to take it in to have service. I had one. I just had one motor there that somebody dumped sugar in his gas tank, and it caused a whole bunch of problems. And then I had another one where it was new fuel on top of old fuel, and it ran for a bit, and it just loosened up everything in the carburetor that was stuck to the old fuel, or the old fuel that had gone bad and stuff in the carburetor. And it just took a while for that to lift that all up and plug the jets and stuff. So it doesn't take much for it to happen. And like I said, it's a chemical reaction. So it's a matter of if you can keep, I guess, the chemicals the same, then you're not really gonna have too much of an issue at that point. So, but okay, so I guess we've done with the premium, and we figured that I guess that's not too bad. I think. I pretty much wore that one out. My recommendation for fuel these days, and because I've done some experimenting with it, and I've talked to the guys at the company, and we've emailed back and forth, and I'm not getting paid for it or anything like that. This is just a free recommendation. I got a kestrel flying around outside here today, so it's rather distracting, but I've been using Shell in my boat and in my truck and my Jeep, and I'm surprised how clean the plugs are coming out compared to a couple of years ago when I was just running every different types of fuel, and it didn't really matter what I ran type thing. So, and because I can only get Shell at certain times, I'll notice improvements in just how the motor idles and stuff like that. So I think there is a difference in fuels. I know there was when I was racing bikes and stuff. There was when I was running race fuels. I had way more horsepower. Not way more horsepower, but the bike ran better. It felt crisper. It accelerated quicker, and it utilized that. As long as the engine will utilize the fuel, then you'll get. And that's why, like I say, if you're using fresh fuel, then your engine is going to run better and it's going to run cleaner because you're using fresh fuel rather than using this fuel that's been sitting there for 3 or 4 weeks, and may not burn as cleanly as the stuff you could have bought just days before type thing, or the same day. So. It's up to you what you want to do, but I'm just trying to save you some grief and aggravation and some dollars, and help you, take care of your own product, take care of your own boat and stuff like that, and not have to rely on us ruthless mechanics and stuff. So, anyways, have fun with it. I got out fishing. A couple of times, so I'm going to tell you about the time we were on Big Rideau with my stepson, and I was throwing, like I always do, pretty much my 3/4 ounce ninja jig with a creature on it, and it's my little crawfish imitation that I use. And because he's skilled, but he's still coming along. He hasn't got the flipping and pitching stuff down just quite yet. So I gave him a fat ace, and I gave him a fat ace because fat aces are new to me. So I was using aces before, but the fat aces are they're fatter and they're a bit longer and they're a bit heavier, so they go back down a bit quicker. So, and we were the section that we were going to fish. Excuse me. The section that we were going to fish was it dropped off into 12 foot of water, 8 to 12 foot of water quite quickly. So, so I wanted something that was going to fall from. So we weren't sitting there for a long time as I was moving us along with the trolling motor. So anyway, long story short, he ended up catching a bit more than me. By the end of the day, I had the biggest one. I took him to one of my little spots that there's a big fish there. Pretty good, I shouldn't say consistently, if people will look at it and find it. There are fish there at times. But anyways, it was a good day on Big Rideau. We went to, helped another guy on the Ottawa River. And that was fun because I was using my Big Easy with the Does It on it. And that's pretty interesting. I'm going to have to start throwing that more and more and more. Because that to me is, it's like a swim bait, search bait, spinner bait, top water, buzz bait, all rolled up into one. And I'll tell you, it does raise a lot of fish. Even if you don't catch them, you certainly locate them, especially if you're doing, a lot of top water or a lot of shallow stuff. So it's to me. I'm not a real frog guy, so I like a buzz bait, but buzz bait in weeds gets, certain types of weeds gets hung up big time. So, and the other thing too is buzz bait you can't really do subsurface of and stuff, but the Big Easy is and it's got some volume to it, so it casts really far. And now with the little blade on it, it means that it gives it a certain amount of flash. And I'm pretty sure that the day we went out, one of the reasons why I was getting more was because the blade that I had was just about the same size as some of the minnows or some of the young of the year that we were seeing and stuff like that. So, or some of the perch that we were seeing as well too, because the perch were a bit smaller. So, I'm not 100% sure, but it definitely made a difference. Either that or it was something new the fish hadn't seen, or because the way the tail goes on it, the way it's sectioned, it has a lot of action to it, and if you crank it really fast, it's a buzzbait. So if you're not or if you're in the weeds and stuff like that, it works really, really well because you can work it through the pads of rice and all sorts of crap of weeds. You can work it through really easily. In the openings, you can let it sit and it'll drop down. It won't sit up like a frog. Now I know some guys like to sit the frogs on the top and stuff like that, but I'm looking for a reaction bite. I'm looking for a fish. If I get a reaction bite and I think a fish is there, I'll throw a worm in or I'll throw a jig in or something like that. So, in that aspect, I won't sit a frog on an area for very long anyway. So. But that's it's all up to your personal preference. So, but I mean, give it a chance. If you see them in the store, or if you can't find them, send me an email. Let me know. I can send you some if you want. But it's you should give it a try, because if you want to be able to find fish fast, and trust me, I've hooked a lot of fish on them as well too. So, and some good fish as well. So, it's worth its shot. So. Anyhow, where else do I went to? I went to another little lake, and I think I told you about that. That was the Gambler Tube Day, I think. Anyways, if not, I was using Gambler tubes on that day, so I just used a lot of Gambler stuff. So that's what can I say? Anyhow, I think I've pretty much killed it today. Thanks for listening. Next episode, I'm going to finish the tournament tactics. This will be the mental game, and sort of ties in with what I did on the Ottawa River and stuff. Because I don't really like the Ottawa River that much, but I've sort of learned to take a certain approach to it. Because mentally, if you say I don't like something straight from the beginning, it's hard to take it positively. So I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. Hope you come back next week and listen, or in my next show. Anyways, my next show is going to be rather quick because I got to drop a few good ones in just to get some leeway time, because I got to do some fishing this week. Anyways, I'd just like to thank Reno for the chance of being on WRVO Radio Network, and we'll see you guys next week, or next show, next episode. Next episode will be a good one. It'll be a Sigmund Freud type of. So get your pens, write some notes down, send some emails. I'm gonna give a day away fishing with me in the boat one day. If anybody's interested, gonna have to come up with some kind of contest. Do you want to get a hold of me? It's info@lanarkcountyconfidential.ca. And remember, Lanark County Confidential, it's all confidential. Thanks for listening. Ciao.